What's up, everybody? The Common Sense Messiah is back to challenge another mainstream narrative. Now, today I want to introduce the man to you from two perspectives, yeah? Okay, one perspective for sure, but two different types of men. I'm going to introduce to you two types of men from the perspective of marriage, dating, and, relationships with women, and also being family oriented. There are two types of men when we come to approaching life when looking at this lens of love, relationships, and dating. So I am going to define them to you. But first, we need to make you people understand that majority of the men out there, their primary motivation in life is sexual. All right? Sex becomes the reason why most of these men are motivated to do what they do. And I like giving the example that as a young man, when you're born, when you're raised, you're taught, you're taken to school, all these things. And then the moment you become an adult, the pressure to perform starts working on you. And that's because intrinsically in your mind, you know that in the future, you're going to be potentially married and a father to someone. And that becomes your driver for motivation in life. Very few men have the capacity to be motivated from a point of, just being motivated themselves. And those are the two types of men that I want to define before you. There's the type of man whose primary motivation in life is sexual in nature. Case in point, the dude I've introduced to you. Born, go through education system. When he becomes an adult, the pressure to perform exists, but it's coming from a perspective of he needs to earn some value for himself so that he can attract certain types of women, so that he can get married to said type of woman, so that he can have kids and give them a quality life. So if you look at this man, the primary reason he's doing all this is so that he can attract females. If the sex aspect was removed from that entire dynamic, he wouldn't be as motivated. So the motivation is coming out of a sexual urge in him that wants him to attract a certain quality of woman and then convince her that he is worthy enough of settling into a relationship with, in a sense. All right? Men are the gatekeepers to relationships, but before that, they must have done a very good pitching for the woman to want to say yes to you in that context. Now, in that context, once you get into a marriage, now the kids come. These are the products of sex, and you have to give them a quality life. So the second motivating factor comes in, giving your family, your kids and wife combined, the quality life. So most men run through life having their purpose being motivated from sex. That is most men. And that's the first type of man I want to introduce to you. What's the second type of man? The second type of man is a man who has completely attached his legacy and his purpose to himself. Case in point, dude is born, taken through the school system, and gets to adulthood, or even early in his early teenage years, starts discovering a certain quality to himself. And the primary reason why he wants to achieve greatness is for his own gratification. You know, I want to be the greatest footballer because, I can. I want to feel that pride. I want to be the greatest civil engineer because I can, I really want that to be my legacy. Greatest civil engineer to have ever lived. Greatest doctor to have ever lived. Even farming, even things like celebrity culture, musician, and all these things, all areas of life. There are men who have defined their purpose as a sense of finding their own gratification, not from a point of providing for someone or even coming from a motivation of sex, just for the or for their own gratification. They need it. These are the high performers, all right? These are the men who go hard on themselves because they're trying to prove something to themselves. They don't give a shit about the world. They don't give a shit about, oh, at some point I'm going to be married, I'm going to be someone's father. No. Their motivation is the legacy that they want to leave, and the legacy they want to leave is attached to their achievements, not to their children or family. But majority of the men tend to be the men who find purpose and a legacy in family. And that's not a problem because that becomes a grounding factor for most men. And I'm going to give an example for each of these two cases and how to identify such in society and how to identify if you are such a type of a man. Because I believe as the world is evolving, yeah, even as we get into the modern times, we have this narrative of men or young men saying that they don't want to get married, they just want to focus on themselves. So the world is leaning to a point where most of the men are going to be the type that are wanting to define their legacy from an intrinsic perspective. They want to be great because they want it for themselves, right? Gone are the days of family values. Gone are the days of finding motivation from having, you want the best, some girls, you want to provide a good life for your family. Most men nowadays, as for those of you who converse with young men a lot, you'll come to understand that they are pursuing greatness from a point of selfishness. And it's selfishness I can allow because it's good. It's really good. So, I want to give you an example of a certain type of guy. There's this guy, potentially, most people looked at him as though he was a waste of life. You know, doesn't have anything going for him. He's potentially a drug user, not an addict, drug user, isn't motivated to want to achieve greatness. Then all of a sudden, out of the blues, he gets careless and gets a certain girl pregnant. And because he still has some morality in him, he decides he's going to be responsible for the child. And that aspect of knowing that he's going to be responsible for the child and the mother gives him purpose, gives him a sense of grounding, and gives him a sense of pursuing greatness, not for himself, but for the responsibility that lies ahead. Those are the type of men that I'm saying are the majority of the men. And if you look at it, most men out there in the world have always operated from that perspective, which is why, especially when you speak to the older generation, our parents and our grandparents, they'll tell you at some point the reason they really wanted to self-improve and be better was because of the wives and the children. Not from a point of the wife motivating them or such, but they understood the responsibility that came with that and it pushed them to be better. But then again, I want you to look at celebrities, okay? Celebrities are the best example of the second type of man. Look at the likes of Michael Jackson, look at the types of, the singers we have, the rappers, look at the types of the actors. Their gratification or the method they use to channel their purpose is through self-gratification. They want to achieve that as their legacy. Greatest artist to have ever walked. I want to produce the best records, the best songs that this world has ever listened to. Not because I have a family to provide to, not because I have a fan base that is listening to, but because I want to do that. I want to be the best. So in that sense, you find that they tend to develop a workaholic culture, and they also tend to become people who are so ambitious. Ambitious to a point of they don't let anything get in the way of their work. And usually, these types of men are not very good family people. They are not family oriented. A good number of them end up having families, and then they end up in divorces, child support lawsuits, and all these things because this person just doesn't have the capacity to sit there and focus on the family. He's not like the majority of the men out there. The majority of the men out there find gratification in that. Family is their greatest legacy, and they want to do right by the family. So that means giving them some time, attention, and all these things. But to this high performing male whose purpose is driven from a point of his own desire to be great, that type of man is not going to be family focused. And when he does decide to have a family, his family life is going to suffer because it's going to be second to his work life, or second to his work life and other supporting factors to his work life. So you find that the family is never really a priority for him because he really needs to perform what his purpose is driving him to do. And that comes at the compromise of everything else. There are very few people who find a balance between this. Now, there are people who are family oriented who tend to find greatness to the level of becoming famous, super wealthy out of being family oriented, and they tend to have a very good balance between work life and family and all these things. But the ones who end up missing out on the family aspect, or the family end up suffering and the relationships end up suffering because of their work life and all that, it's most likely because this type of men are seeking to pursue greatness. If they were really honest to themselves, they look within themselves, they will understand that they want to pursue greatness for their own self-gratification. And that is not a bad thing because the greatest things have been achieved by such men. Family requires you to divide your attention and, be a bit more compromising on your goals because there's just that duality of it. Family life, work life, family life, work life. The people who tend to achieve the greatest things without any compromise are these people who focus on their set goal and go hard at it, and letting everything else come second to that. So why am I telling you this? So that you can understand. If you're a man, you need to understand what type of man you are when you're coming to define these two type of men. And if you're a woman, then you need to understand what comes with dating each type of man. For the man who's family oriented and all that, that's a very secure man for you to end up in a relationship with. For the man who is super focused on his goals and all of that, he's a high achiever for sure most of the times, and you're gonna enjoy some wealth, some luxury and all of that, but the quality of relationship you guys are gonna have is gonna be very subpar, because this type of men do not compromise their goals for anything. Their goals are the most important thing to them. So that having been said, you guys have a nice time, and tell me what you think in the comments.